Chapter 7 of Esthajnalcsillag Morningstar. Fall came to Morningstar's little town, and with it came the opening of school. Morningstar would don her navy blue pleated skirt and white long-sleeved shirt, tie her little red kerchief around her neck like a good little communist should, put her little golden cross under it around her neck like a good Lutheran little girl should. And off she would go to school. The little girl figured this way she could avoid stepping on anyone's sensitive toes, thereby avoiding the slapping routine. Usually this method worked rather well. Morningstar's father resigned to the fact that this was the way of the land now, and his daughter must abide by the rules. Morningstar's father was also a teacher before the new regime took over. He knew most of the little girls' instructors very well. This was not always an advantage for our little girl because if Morningstar did not produce excellent results in school, she was doomed for punishment. Morningstar always did her homework and practiced writing. From all the punishment writing she had to do, Morningstar had beautiful handwriting. If the little girl's homework was not up to par, her father would throw it in the fire, and Morningstar was made to do the work over again. Not only did the homework have to be correct, but also neatly and flawlessly written. Even from school, Morningstar brought home punishment writings. She gathered this was a favorite pastime of teachers to assign such things. She was told to write 100 times that I must not whisper in class, I must not wear a cross to school, I must show proper respect for my teachers, etc., etc. Most of the times, these reproaches were uncalled for, but at this time, Morningstar did not understand that these punishments were actually a warning for her father to take note of, rather than the result of the little girl's bad behavior. Our little girl was not aware of political party doctrines. She only knew that for some reason the teachers were against her. And no matter how hard she tried, there was always something that did not please them. So Morningstar tried even harder to be an exemplary student. After a while, her teachers could only find fault in her if they made it up. She was not allowed to play with her classmates, even during recess. At lunchtime, a little girl was made to sit at a separate table together with her brother. The teachers were told not to allow the minister's children to have any contact with other pupils, since these children might influence the other pupils in a religious manner. Now, of course, the little girl had absolutely no idea what that might mean, but she accepted this situation as a fact and did as she was instructed to do by her teachers. Morningstar's brother had a much harder time in school because the dreaded and hated principal of the school, who, by the way, was a stalwart and hardcore party liner, did everything he could to make life impossible for the young boy. The child was hauled to the principal's office every morning before the beginning of classes and given the third degree. He was asked to spy on his parents and anyone else that came to Morningstar's house. Of course, the boy knew no information that could be passed on because no political talks or meetings were ever mentioned in Morningstar's house. The father made sure that separation of the church and the state was complete and without reproach. If there was talk about matters of state and party rule, the children were not a witness to them. The principal of the grade school was disappointed because he had nothing to report on the activities of the minister or his family. In those days, many priests, ministers, religious leaders were arrested and taken to prison on untrue and fictitious charges. But against Morningstar's father, no charges could be coerced. He just kept low and waited for this storm called communism to calm down and to have things return to some resemblance to order and logical common sense. But this storm, instead of calming down, grew day by day to be a tempest and then an all engulfing hurricane that took everything and everyone with it. Little by little, Morningstar's older brother grew tired of the constant pressure on him and wanted to avoid attending school. Not to attend school was against the law, and of course, not the principal, but Morningstar's parents were blamed for the child's antisocial behavior. Morningstar's brother, who was only one grade ahead of our little girl, started to have problems. He would become violent and aggressive. He would pick fights and even hit the younger children and the little schoolgirls. This was, of course, reported to Morningstar's father, and he was told to use stricter discipline on the young boy. There was already rule by an iron fist in the house, and Morningstar's father could not understand why upbringing that worked so well on the little girl was a total failure when it came to his son. So the father of Morningstar resorted to physical punishment. First, it was just in the form of a few good, well-aimed fatherly slaps, and then it went on to beatings. The young boy was told that he must keep his morning talks with the school principal a secret. And if he dared to tell his parents what is going on, then he will be sent to a correctional facility for deviant young boys. The young boy was scared, and his only defense was in being uncooperative and unmanageable. After a while, Morningstar became a target also for the brother's outbursts of anger, and she was not spared of beatings and other forms of unpleasantness from her brother. As time went by, Morningstar's father started to believe what the boy's teacher said about the child and started to look around for an institution for the totally unmanageable boy. Morningstar's father took the boy to his doctor friends at first to find out what is wrong exactly, but these doctors could find nothing wrong with the child. Then the father took the boy to a few institutions to have him examined, but on all these visits, the young boy showed no signs of psychological disorder. One of the doctors asked Morningstar's father if he is in complete awareness of the political situation and that does he know what some principals and teachers make the children do in their schools. This was the first time that Morningstar's father heard of coercing children to spy against their families, and the minister was shocked. He could not understand how a teacher who is pledged to develop and protect a child's mind could stoop such a lowly and cowardly behavior as to use children in order to get good points with the Communist Party leaders. But these were the early 1950s, and such things happened all over Hungary, in every school, every day. The children that snitched or were believed to have told on their families were removed from the anti party families and held up as an example to be followed by the other children. They were given special treats and trips, even to Moscow, to show how much the party appreciates such a proper conduct from all young communist seedlings. Most children gave out information unwillingly and unknowingly as to what the consequences of their actions will be. The bits and pieces of a child's babbling were written down and gathered into a file on the parents, and then used against the parents in their mock trials. This was the first knowledge that the grown ups received of what was supposedly said about them by their children. The children were bribed by treats of chocolate or meager little toys, candy, and showing of pretend affection by their teachers. The idea was to separate the children from the bounds and restrictions of family ties. This way, the child was under the total control of the teachers and through them the Communist Party. They could be formed and molded to fit the communist ideological mold. Morning Star was not immune from such early morning chats either. She was liked by her teachers, but the few teachers that decided to speak up against the practices of the principal were soon offered a teaching position in Siberia. To this offer, the only possible answer was yes, or else it was death camps for the erring instructors. Our little girl's logical mind was fast at work. She knew the only way to survive all of this was to pretend that she was stupid. In those days, it was an accepted fact that girls are not as smart as boys. Our little girl noticed that the less intelligent students were left alone by the teachers. So instead of being at the top of the class, she concentrated on being an average gray little mouse with an average gray little report card. This way, she avoided attention being drawn on her, and everyone seemed to be happy with this state of affairs. A few of the little girl's teachers did mention to her that they knew she is capable of higher grades if she put her mind to it. Morning Star thought to herself that it is hard enough not to put her mind to it. Morning Star was informed that she would not be allowed to study past eighth grade graduation. So there was totally no reason to raise her marks any higher than average. Our little girl grew very quiet, and she smiled even less. She only talked when she was asked something, and that answered in the fewest possible amount of words. The little girl did not argue with her teachers, and she took the taunting and belittling remarks of her classmates without a comment. She understood that the children were only repeating what they heard at home, and these remarks had nothing to do with her or the truth. These were the rules of the games of life in those days, and Morningstar learned to play by the rules. She did very well at this. After a few weeks, things settled into the routine, an everyday humdrum, and Morningstar continued to learn all that she could possibly muster. She kept the knowledge growing inside her little young mind locked up, drew her own conclusions, and then, as if locking in a vault for later use, she stored it. As fall drew to an end and the weather became colder, the trees lost their splendid fall colors of gold and brown and red. Morning Star knew that soon her beautiful lake would turn into a magical winter crystal palace, a wonderland filled with shimmering ice, white snow that was like powdered sugar, and then winter fun on the lake would begin. Morning Star was given a pair of used skates. Where she lived, not only did everyone know how to swim, but to ski and skate also. Our little girl was not exactly apt at this production. The skate seemed to go one way, and Morning Star usually wound up in a different direction. This direction was in line with the pull of gravity. In other words, Morning Star found herself in the sit down position on the ice rather than in a smooth and gliding upright position. The lake did not form a smooth covering of ice. At the shoreline, there were small creations of ice. To Morning Star, these resembled hard boiled eggs, only in light blue, gray, and white colors. For those unfortunate souls that were not born to be able to balance on a slippery ice, there was a wooden chair like contraption that was sitting on a pair of skis. These chairs, the ladies and elderly people were seated in and then pushed around on the ice by a more able bodied person. So, our little girl was placed in one of these until the time that she stops getting into close physical contact with the ice. The mornings in the late fall and winter time brought with them a thick, milky fog. Morning Star actually liked this foggy weather. It felt to our little girl as if Mother Nature was engulfing her in this misty wonderland. She could not see past her nose in that thick fog. Morning Star could pretend that she was alone. Actually, our little girl liked to be alone by herself. Her imagination could soar, and she did not have to deal with the harsh and also unfair realities of life. The morning fog would freeze on the limbs of the trees, making them look lacy and white. The complete silence of these early morning hours were enjoyed to the fullest by our little girl. She felt in the lap of Mother Nature and that no one could harm her because Mother Nature gave her complete protection. The little girl's feelings of security vanished. Our little girl knew that her morning walk to school would end and that she would come face to face with the day's lies and tribulations. If only real life could be as pure and honest as nature was, then there would be happier people around, Morning Star thought to herself. In the winter, when the deep freeze came, Morning Star's toes and fingers would freeze also. This was due to a little problem in the girl's circulation, her father was told. Before going to school, Morning Star had to make a quick stop to the medical center. She would have quartz therapy for those frostbitten limbs. After a few visits, Morning Star learned how to turn the machine on by herself. She signed herself into the clinic's logbook, turned on the machine, and took her 15 minutes of this warm, soothing therapy. Then she would turn off the machine, sign herself out, and walk across the street to her school. These frostbites came back to haunt Morningstar in her later years also. Some of the arthritis and rheuma that she suffered from could be traced back to these injuries to her limbs suffered as a young child. Morningstar could not understand why she was so sensitive to the cold. In school, she was teased by her classmates for being a sissy, and probably she is always ill because she is not of peasant heritage, but of intellectual parents. To be the offspring of intellectuals during the communist era was not a most favorable parentage. Morningstar would claim that her parents were peasants who died working in the fields and that the Lutheran minister and his wife adopted her. Of course, no one believed this nonsense of the little girl. Morningstar had such a strong desire to fit in with the rest of the children in school that she was willing to do just about anything to become accepted. Of course, our little girl was not aware that it was just politically impossible to become an accepted member of this working class community. She was a minister's daughter, therefore different from most of the children in her class. End of chapter 7.